Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. We'll bring this informational hearing to order. I want to welcome and thank Chairman Hall, members of both the Assembly and the Senate committees for joining us at this joint informational hearing titled California's Earthquake Preparedness, Status of the Earthquake Early Warning System. This will be the first in a series of hearings that will explore the many jurisdictions under this committee. It is my goal as chair that we not only enact legislation, but take an active role in overseeing its implementation. Although no one can reliably predict earthquakes, I'm hopeful that today's hearings will provide this committee, as well as members of the Senate, with a greater understanding of earthquake early warning technology. I'm encouraged by the work that the California Office of Emergency Services is doing on the issue, as mandated by SB 135 Padilla. I look forward on hearing from experts on the status of the earthquake early warning system in California, the challenges that we must still overcome to establish such a system, and the way that such technology can be used. Thank you again. Chairman Hall, would you like to provide a few remarks?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, God, it's too early. First of all, good afternoon. I want to begin by thanking Chairman Gray for agreeing to host today's joint hearing and for the great work we'll be doing this session on a number of important policy issues. As you're aware, the disaster landscape in the state of California is far-reaching and encompasses a range of natural and some man-made disasters, including wildfires, floods, earthquakes, tsunamis, heat wave, and freeze-related disasters, or the threat of rapidly spreading infectious diseases. I believe that the first duty of government is to protect the people of the great state of California. Over the next few hours, we will explore a number of questions about how California can better protect its people from earthquakes, specifically as it relates to development of an earthquake early warning system as mandated by Senate Bill 135 Padilla of 2013. Such an early warning system will be immensely helpful in providing residents and first responders with advance notice that could reduce injuries and save lives, as well as stave off major infrastructure damage by shutting down systems. I'm hopeful that this hearing will include a thoughtful examination of what has been accomplished to date, so that we can get a better grasp of the state's strengths and areas of improvement. I would like to thank our witnesses in advance for sharing their expertise with us as we embark on this effort to build a better emergency preparedness partnership with all in the months and years ahead. I look forward to hearing their views and insights, and also hopefully hear the questions and insights of our senators and our assembly members that are present. So again, Mr. Chair, thank you for agreeing to host today, and I will be ready to ask questions when called upon. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, I think we'll begin with our first presentation, an overview and historical perspective of earthquakes in California. We welcome John Parrish to the podium. Thank you, sir, for being here and providing testimony for the committee.
Let me take just a moment here to open up Good afternoon, Chairman Gray, Chairman Hall, members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me. I'm John Parrish, California State Geologist and Chief of the Geological Survey. I'm going to take just a brief moment to give you a very fast 25-cent tour of the seismic history of California. I decided to leave out the first 12 million years and just concentrate on about the last 100 years and some earthquakes that occurred then, because it is those quakes that this legislature reacted to with specific legislation that has come about. And as Chairman Hall alluded to, Senator Padilla's SB 135 is a time where the legislature has moved prior to an event occurring but has recognized the dangers of the seismic threat in California. Well, of course, as you know, California is the most geologically diverse state in the nation. It is also the most populous state with 38 million people. We have produced here the world's 8th largest economy, and we produce 13% of the U.S. gross national product. And we have built all of this on the most seismically active state in the nation outside of Alaska. So our investment lies on the shakiest ground on the continental United States. If we look at earthquakes in California over the past 200 years, we've had 75 earthquakes larger than magnitude 6, which is considered a damaging earthquake. That means that about every 2.5 years we have a greater than magnitude 6 earthquake, and about every 9 or 10 years we have a magnitude 7 earthquake, which is very damaging. This map shows the colored areas is where the pieces of the state have endured severe ground shaking, Mercalli 7 shaking. And the hotter the colors, the more times that these areas have endured extreme ground shaking. Well, California records, the California Integrated Seismic Network records between 400 and 700 earthquakes a week in California. That's about 20,000 earthquakes a year. Fortunately, about 98% of those are what we call microquakes. They're less than magnitude 2. But we do have about 300 quakes a year that are felt by someone somewhere, and that's about 1 a day. We also have calculated the total expected annual losses by county in the state due to earthquakes. And you can see the large red areas, and the hotter the colors, the greater the annualized losses. But generally in the San Francisco area of heavy population, the Bay Area, the Los Angeles area, San Bernardino, we're talking about $200 million to $1.6 billion annually in losses from, annualized losses from earthquakes. And the Federal Emergency Management Agency has calculated that in the state of California, we will receive 75% of all the earthquake damage done in the United States on an annualized basis. That's about $3.26 billion a year annualized that California will suffer. Even though Alaska is the most seismically active, you can see that it's somewhere around 0.04% of a billion. Well, one of the reasons is that California is an extremely highly faulted state. We have a lot of fault activity here. The state survey has mapped over 15,000 surface faults, and about 5,000 miles of those are considered active and dangerous. There's at least that many faults which we have not mapped, which are subsurface, and we don't know where they are. And on the right map shows the potential for California earth shaking. This is a probability map. The hotter the colors that you see there, the greater the probability of severe earthquakes and severe shaking. And that, if that were overlaid on this population map, you would see that's where most of the state's economy is produced from those areas. Every 3 or 4 years, the U.S. Geological Survey, the California Survey, and the Southern California Earthquake Center produce what's called the Uniform California Earthquake Rupture Forecast. That is, what are the chances of us having an earthquake? And you can see from that that in Southern California and Northern California, we divide the state, that in Southern California there's a 97% chance in the next 30 years that we will have a Northridge-sized earthquake. That's a magnitude 6.7 for reference. In the Northern California, there's a 93% chance that we will have a Northridge-sized earthquake. And you can see the rest of the calculations there. Well, I want to talk to you quickly about a few earthquakes where the legislature responded in some fashion. And of course, the first one is the San Francisco earthquake. This was quite devastating earthquake. And the response at the time was an argument that occurred over whether insurance companies should pay for the shaking and the fire damage. And the California legislature in 1909 produced the standard form of fire insurance policy that mandated earthquakes be included in regular insurance policies. That lasted until the Northridge earthquake, 1994, when a number of insurance companies were going to pull out of the state because of the damage that was done, and ultimately ended up with the creation of the California Earthquake Authority, the CEA, which offers the earthquake insurance. A second earthquake occurred about 19 years later or so in Santa Barbara. This was a devastating earthquake for there, but what this earthquake started was a real discussion about statewide building standards because of the devastation that was being felt around the state. 1933, the Long Beach earthquake occurred 8 years later. This earthquake was important in that it destroyed or leveled about 120 schools. And this legislature sent down a research team to see why this happened, and it turned out that the results of that investigation were that local inspections had been falsified, equipment had been substituted, there were outright bribes, poor inspections, and so forth over the years by the local agency. And within 30 days of the 1933 earthquake, the legislature passed the Field Act, which required the state architect to now permit all public schools in the state. And we're very happy to say that since that time, any school that has been permitted by the state architect has not suffered structural damage from an earthquake, or structural destruction from an earthquake. The state architect works very closely with the California Survey, since we peer review all the seismic studies that are done for that school prior to the state architect signing off on it. So we have a real system that is working very well here. In 1971, the San Fernando earthquake, sometimes called the Sylmar earthquake, occurred. And following this earthquake, the legislature passed the Alquist-Priolo Earthquake Fault Zoning Act in 1972. That's been in the news here lately for about the last year. But this requires the state geologist to put mandatory zones of investigation around all the active faults in the state, so that we do not end up building structures across active faults. The legislature also passed the Strong Motion Instrumentation Program Act in 1972, which set up with the state survey a strong motion network in California. All of that data then goes into enforcing and building the state's building codes to make them more rigorous. And over the last 40 years, California has developed some of the most rigorous building codes in the world. Also in 1973, the legislature passed the Alfred E. Alquist Facilities Seismic Safety Act, which also put the state architect in charge of permitting hospitals, because there were too many hospitals now collapsing in some of these earthquakes. The Whittier Narrows earthquake occurred then in 1987, and the respective part of this is, you can see the big building that collapsed. That was not very good construction going on at those times. But there were 10,500 structures damaged in this particular earthquake, very widespread damage. And that re-upped the emphasis on building codes to be strengthened. 1989, of course, was the Loma Prieta earthquake. And what came out of that is we saw a great deal of liquefaction around the state. And the legislature enacted the Seismic Hazards Mapping Act 1 year later, in which the state survey maps liquefaction and landslide zones, which become regulatory maps at the local level, so that local permitting agencies can impose stricter building code parameters on structures that are in these particular areas. And of course, the 1994 Northridge earthquake, this, as you can see, did 9,000 plus injuries and $40 billion in damage. The result from this was that Caltrans went around to all the freeways in California and strengthened the pillars and strengthened those support facilities so that they did not collapse, as you see there in the lower left-hand corner. Well, based on the 1972 work from the legislature, California Strong Motion Instrumentation Program has been developed over the last 40 years. That is now run by the state survey. There's over 1,400 stations and 9,000 instruments throughout the state recording strong motion data, all of which goes into the California Building Code to make California's buildings more resilient. Well, during this same time, there were a number of other networks that were being developed by universities, by private sectors, and about 15 years ago it was decided that why don't we get all of these networks together, standardize our output, standardize the quality of work that we're doing, and standardize the message that can be delivered. And so the California Integrated Seismic Network was created, and that's what's serving California today. It's made up of the core members of the U.S. Geological Survey, the Caltech Seismological Lab, UC Berkeley Seismological Lab, CGS, and the California Office of Emergency Services, plus a lot of participating members, which are both university, academic institutions, and private sector companies, all of which contribute data into the system and help in its distribution. It has its own management tree here, where all the participants and all the users of this are represented so that we can meet and continually keep the system up and running and updated. And already the CISN today is producing a host of post-seismic earthquake products, which go all the way from the CISN display, which is what you saw earlier as the map showing all the earthquakes occurring. It's actually, we pick up the entire world is now displayed on that. Plus Shake Maps, ShakeCast, which is used by Caltrans and a number of other industries for specific earthquake damage to their particular properties. Pager, which predicts damage and costs and loss of life. ENS, which you can get over your cell phone or messages over your computer. And there's many more. Well, the next big product that CISN wants to bring to the people of the state of California is the earthquake early warning. And as Senator Padilla's SB 135 stipulates, that the California Integrated Seismic Network will or shall provide for earthquake early warning system for the people of the state of California. And that's what we are currently here to present to you, where we are in that stage, and we are very excited about it. It's a union of a lot of groups together, and I think they have a very fine product that they would like to show to you. And I will leave that demonstration up to those following. Thank you very much for your attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your presentation. At this time, we'll open up for any questions from the members. Mr. John Sawyer.
Thank you. Actually, this is dear to my heart. I used to be a floor warden coordinator, building emergency preparedness coordinator, and emergency EMC. So I've been trained at Emmitsburg, at the Emergency Management Institute, logistics, Northridge earthquake I went through in the city of LA. And so I'm glad to hear this. And I want to ask this historical perspective because when the city had their last earthquake, I was in charge of unreinforced masonry, making sure that about $100 million worth of city buildings were seismically reinforced. And as you could see, we kind of have this progression of what was the worst thing that could happen, worst case scenarios. So it was whether it's schools, hospitals, and now we went through freeways. As you, from a historical standpoint, what could be the next worst case scenario that we could have at particular buildings? And I'm speaking from the point of Los Angeles right now. We're looking at our high-rise buildings.
Yes.
What kind of types of buildings could we have as far as failures and collapses that would become more than the $40 billion or whether that happened in Northridge? We could be looking at $100, $200 billion with another type of building that could be going down?
Yes, I think the types of buildings now that, especially in the Los Angeles area, that are of most concern is the old non-ductile concrete style buildings. They were outlawed in the state in the early 1970s, but we have, I think the city's done a study, there's about 1,200 of those buildings in Los Angeles, non-ductile concrete. Those are very susceptible to ground shaking, and those will collapse. We build to life safety standards today that says the building will not collapse around you if you're in it, but those non-ductile buildings will collapse, and you won't have any chance of getting out.
Those will pancake, the floors
They will
come down?
pancake, yes.
Thank you.
You know, one of the things I didn't hear you touch on was a comparison or any discussion of an earthquake early warning system in other countries and what experiences have been or lessons learned and things we might apply as we seek to put this in place here in California.
I think some of my colleagues later are going to address that more thoroughly, but a number of other countries, Japan, Mexico, I think Turkey, so forth, have, and Chile, I think, has one, early warning systems. They have been very effective in the countries. Their design for their country has been very effective. And what we're looking at here in California is a California-centric system that will be very effective to meet California's needs here. And they will discuss some of those others in more detail.
Okay, Mr. Gibson.
Thank you very much. First of all, I really appreciate the presentation. I think it's very thorough. Just following up on Member Joan Sawyer's comments, you made mention about some structures that will pancake. What has been done, if anything, to make sure that that doesn't happen in those buildings as it relates to notifications, the occupants there? Is it a sign you enter at your own risk? Are people informed, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, I think that's the hot topic you touched on there. I think your colleague from the Los Angeles area knows that those buildings are very dangerous, and the question is, does management let the tenants know that they're in a seismically dangerous building or not? And I don't have an answer for that. That's much more of a legal question and an insurance question and so forth, and a political question for the Los Angeles City Council to hammer through.
Yes. Would you be willing to provide your presentation to the committee for the record?
Oh, yes.
Thank
yes,
you.
Of course.
Okay, do we see any other questions? Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
your presentation. And at this juncture, we're going to move to our next panel, the role of the federal government. If Douglas Given could approach, make your presentation. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Let me find the presentation here and get it fired up. Chairman Hall and Chairman Gray, members of the Joint Committee, thank you for this opportunity to give the federal perspective from the U.S. Geological Survey and its role and vision for protecting the state of California by completing the Shake Alert Earthquake Early Warning System. My name is Doug Given. I am the National Earthquake Early Warning Coordinator for the USGS, and I'm also the Project Chief of the Southern California Seismic Network and a lifelong Californian. John gave you a good overview. I'll be reiterating a little bit of what he showed you. So, for example, the earthquake risk in California is very well known. FEMA has estimated that the direct losses in the state average more than $3.5 billion every year, which is 3/4 of the national total. And the indirect losses, loss of business opportunities, for example, would be even greater, many times this estimate. It's the mission of the USGS Earthquake Hazards Program to reduce these earthquake losses. Over the last 15 years, the USGS has joined with states, universities, and private partners to develop and operate a nationwide earthquake monitoring network called the Advanced National Seismic System, or ANSS. And the California part of that system is the California Integrated Seismic Network, or CISN. All the core members of the CISN are present here today and will be giving testimony. The USGS, the California Geological Survey, the California Office of Emergency Services, UC Berkeley, Caltech, and there are many other private partners and other entities that provide data to the system. The CISN is a national leader in earthquake science and technology innovation. Our earthquake products are used to estimate hazards, set insurance rates, develop building codes, and engineer resilience into critical infrastructure. And our post-earthquake products are used to guide emergency response, recovery, do quick analysis of impacts, and to inform policymakers and the public after large damaging earthquakes occur. Today, thanks to the concerted research and development that has happened in the CISN and among its partners, the CISN is advanced to a point that it can now detect earthquakes and send alerts so quickly that people and systems can take protective actions before the damaging shaking arrives at their location. This capability we call Shake Alert. In its current demonstration phase, Shake Alert has been delivering earthquake warning to dozens of test users for more than 3 years. In that time, it's successfully captured many earthquakes, including every damaging earthquake since its inception. The federal mandate for earthquake early warning, as described in our technical implementation plan, includes all 3 states of the West Coast. And in fact, just last week, I was in Seattle for the rollout of the demonstration version of the Shake Alert system for Washington and Oregon. But California continues to lead the way, both technically and organizationally, in implementing this life-saving technology. Cal OES is currently creating a state implementation plan for the California Early Warning System, or CEWS, that will outline a strategy to advance the Shake Alert system from its current demonstration phase to a fully operational phase. We're pleased that the state is aggressively pursuing the completion of this system and shares our goal of providing free alerts to the public. Both state and federal efforts are aligned in their commitment to provide earthquake early warning to California by leveraging the capabilities of the CISN. Shake Alert will reduce future earthquake losses, but the system is not complete or ready for public release. We still need additional sensors, more robust telecommunications, operational staff, more rigorous testing, further development of alert pathways, user education, and of course, stable, ongoing operational funding. Completing Shake Alert will require a coordinated effort from federal, state, and local governments, universities, private partners, and all stakeholders. About $30 million has been invested so far by USGS, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, and the cities of Los Angeles and Long Beach through FEMA grants facilitated by Cal OES. It's estimated that in California, about $24 million are needed to complete the system infrastructure build-out, and that operations and maintenance will cost between $12 and $14 million a year. This is over and above the about $14 million a year that is already invested to support earthquake monitoring in California. Cal OES is actively exploring funding models for the state of California, and at the federal level, the USGS budget includes $1.5 million per year for Shake Alert, in addition to its support of the underlying CISN network. This year, Congress appropriated an additional $5 million to advance the Shake Alert system for the West Coast. And the President's request for FY16 includes a total of $5 million for earthquake early warning. This federal funding is seen as a down payment on a complete system, and additional investment is needed before a fully operational system can go live to the public. Finally, public-private partnerships will be critical to the success of this system. Today, CISN partners contribute data and provide telemetry, but more such partners are needed. Hazard management and mass notification companies will customize alerts and deliver them to their clients. Other companies will manufacture and sell control equipment or alarms and help their clients design custom decision logic to make proper decisions about how to protect their personnel and their facilities. Full implementation of the Shake Alert early warning system will save lives, will reduce injuries, and it will decrease property damage. It will make California businesses and infrastructure more resilient and speed the economic recovery in areas hit by earthquakes. Other countries like Japan, Mexico, and China have been motivated to build earthquake early warning systems in response to devastating earthquakes. It's our hope that the USGS will build our system before and not after the next killer earthquake. I thank you for this opportunity and would enjoy answering any of your questions.